In this lesson, we'll learn about dome light. Dome light is often used for image-based lighting or IBL. In this popular lighting method, you take a high dynamic range image or an HDRI and use it as your light source. So when you create a dome light, you basically get a virtual spherical or hemispherical light source around your entire scene. Then you assign a 360-degree spherical HDRI image to that sphere or hemisphere, and you would get a nice beautiful lighting which is based off of the color and intensity information from that texture that you have assigned to your dome light. I'll be working with the scene from Chaos Group. To make it easier, I have assigned a default VRA material as the material override for the entire scene and excluded the pool materials. Also, again, I'm using Aces as my color manager. From now on, assume that I am in Aces unless I tell you otherwise. Just make sure to provide the right config file in the VFB. If I run the IPR right now, you notice because we don't have any light source in the scene, we get a dark render. Let's add a dome light. You can create a V-Ray dome light right from the Create panel, Lights, V-Ray and V-Ray Light, and then change the light type to dome. Or we can simply use V-Ray toolbar. So from the V-Ray toolbar, click on V-Ray dome light and then click once in the viewport, the perspective view or the top view. Now we have created a dome light in the scene. Always remember that the dome light encompasses the entire scene and the size of its icon doesn't matter. By default, we get a simple white virtual sphere around our scene. We can increase the multiplier value to 20 and get a fairly basic lighting. And also, if you come down to this dome light option, if you turn off this full dome spherical option, you would get just a hemisphere above the ground. For now, let's set the multiplier to 1. Now we actually want to map a texture onto the dome light. That's the whole point of having a dome light. So click on this No Map button, choose a V-Ray bitmap. In your project files, go to your Scene Assets, Images, and HDRIs folder. I have a bunch of HDRIs from hdrihaven.com, a great resource for free HDRIs. Make sure to go to their website and support them by donating. They have tons of high quality free HDRIs, and let's load this dry field 4K HDRI for now. And now we are using the color information of that texture to lit our scene. You can see it's too dark. We can increase the multiplier to add to the overall intensity of the light. Something like 20 would be enough for now. You can see a simple combination of a dome light and an HDRI texture will result in an effortless and extremely realistic lighting. Imagine there are hundreds of free HDRIs on the web, each with different attributes and color information, and each one will result in a different lighting. We will try a few different HDRIs later on. For now, let's learn a few basic things that we need to know about dome lights. Now, to rotate the texture as you are rotating your dome light, go to the dome light rollout and enable this lock texture to icon. Now, if you start rotating the dome light in the perspective view, the HDRI image will rotate as well. And because this particular HDRI image has a shining sun, we can control how that sun will affect our scene and the direction of the shadows. To have a bit more control over this HDRI image, we can open up our material editor by pressing M and instance our dome light texture to the active view. To see the HDRI image that we are using, we can click on this View Image button, and this is the image that is responsible for that instant beautiful lighting. We get this nice blue sky, a shining sun, and a dry field. Let's close this window for now. Now, in addition to the dome light itself, we can use a V-Ray bitmap to control both the intensity and the orientation of the light. Let me zero out the Z rotation of the dome light in the scene first. And now we can use this horizontal and vertical rotation values in the V-Ray bitmap to rotate the HDRI. Obviously, you would change the horizontal rotation more often. So let's try 50 degrees, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, and 350. For now, let's set it to around 170 degrees. Also, you can flip the texture horizontally or vertically. We can also control the intensity of the light right from here. So if I set the dome light multiplier to 1, I can use the overall multiplier value in the VRay bitmap node to control the intensity and brightness of the light. Let's try 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Probably something like 25 will result in a well-exposed render. In the mapping section up here, make sure the mapping type is correct. Different HDR images might come in different mapping types: angular, cubic, spherical, or mirrored ball. This one has a spherical mapping method, so that is what we will use. And because we are in ACES, we will change the RGB color space to sRGB primaries. Now let's try a few other HDRIs and see how they result in a completely different lighting. Let's shift drag the current VRay bitmap node to create a copy. Select it and load this wasteland underscore clouds HDRI and use it as the dome light texture. I'm going to set the overall multiplier to 12 and H rotation to 75. And as you can see, this will result in a completely different lighting. Let's make another copy and this time load this sky underscore sunset HDRI and use it as the texture for the dome light. Set its H rotation to 125 degrees and overall multiplier to 35. Now we get this nice dark purplish close to sunset or sunrise lighting, which is amazing. Let's go for another one. I'm going to make a copy and load this moonless underscore golf HDRI and use it as the dome light map. I'm going to change the rotation to 50 degrees and multiplier to 10. And now we get this beautiful nighttime render. So you can see the power of dome light in combination with different HDRI images. Beautiful, realistic, effortless lighting. For now, let's use our first HDRI as our dome light texture. And let's get back to our dome light itself. We have this effect alpha checkbox. By default, it's disabled, and that means the dome light won't affect the alpha channel. In the VRay frame buffer, if I select the alpha channel by clicking this button here or just changing the element to alpha channel here, you can see the light isn't contributing at all when this option is disabled. Let's enable effect alpha, and now as you can see, the light is contributing to the alpha channel as well. For now, let's disable it. We will come back to these photon emission options when discussing caustics. And the last important option in the dome light is this adaptive dome checkbox. For this, let me first save out this first scene as the finished version. And then open up the second scene for this lesson. Now, this is a fairly simple interior scene from Chaos Group. Now, we talk about interior lighting later on, but for now, let's add a simple dome light to the scene and make sure to add our dome light from the perspective view or the top view so it would have the correct orientation. And let's go to the modify panel of the light and add that dry field HDRI as the texture map. Now open up the material editor and instance it in the active view and run the IPR. First of all, make sure the RGB color space is set to sRGB primaries. Now to make sure the sun shines through the window, set the horizontal orientation to 105 degrees and the overall multiplier to about 100. Okay, so this is the render we get. Now let me stop the render to show you something. We can close the frame buffer as well. If I go to the perspective view, you notice our entire interior scene has just this small window, so the light from the dome light can shine through our scene only through this small opening. The problem is, as we learned, dome light is a virtual sphere around our entire scene, and in this case we want the dome light to focus its sampling only to this window area, and the adaptive dome option does exactly that. When it is enabled, which is by default, V-Ray will automatically optimizes the sampling for the dome light in scenes like this and would give us faster and less noisier renders. Now, before this adaptive dome option was available, we used to place a normal V-Ray light behind the windows or other openings to our interior scene and then enable this skylight portal option for them. But the adaptive dome option in the dome light has replaced that option, and we do not need to do that anymore. Now let's get back to our camera. I want to show you two renders. In the first render, adaptive dome is enabled, and in the second one it is disabled. The first render with adaptive dome on took 2 minutes and 54 seconds, and in the second render with adaptive dome off it took 3 minutes and 19 seconds. So in this case we gain 15-20% faster renders with it being on. One thing about the adaptive dome option, in order for it to work, you need to have light cache as one of your primary or secondary GI solutions. But the good thing is we use light cache as a secondary GI solution in almost all cases. Now we haven't talked about GI or global illumination yet. That's okay. Just keep that in mind for later. Cool. Now let me save out this scene as the finished version and get back to the previous scene. Now let's quickly prepare for the final render. I'm gonna set the resolution to 1920 to 2000. In the V-Ray tab, make sure the render time limit is set to 0, so we don't limit our render with time, and decrease the noise threshold to 0.005. It's a fairly simple scene, so probably 0.01 would be enough actually, especially that we would add V-Ray denoiser. Now, I don't think about optimizing the scene and the render settings for a faster render at this stage of the course. As long as it comes out clean, I don't care about a minute or two here and there. Let's add a V-Ray denoiser render element as well. And now we can start the final render. Now I have already rendered them and saved them to the history panel. So here is our first dome light, the second one, and finally the third one. You can obviously, get different HDRIs from hdrihaven.com, hdrihaven.com, and kind of try different lighting scenarios. It could be very fun. Okay, so that's about V-Ray dome light. See you in the next video.